Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening, wherever you are in the country. I suspect some of you might be experiencing some more wetter conditions than what we are in Wellington, but I think we're getting our share of that in the next day or two. So I hope everything's good with you wherever you are and you're coping okay. So my name is David Beattie, and I've been at Booster now for 22.5 years. Most of that time I have spent looking after investment portfolios and the money that we are responsible for in our superannuation and investment schemes. I had 17 years at Westpac before that, also mostly as Chief Investment Officer. So that's my main area of expertise, but over the last decade or so, I've been quite significantly involved in working with our financial advisors who are part of the network, and also getting up to speed with a lot of behavioural finance issues when it comes to looking after money. So I'm hoping to inject all of that experience in the next 20 minutes or so while we go through tonight's broadcast. Now, what I'm going to do is minimise myself so that all you can see is the screen, and then we'll go from there and crack on. I know we're all very busy, so let's get into it. Okay, so that picture was not taken yesterday, as you can probably imagine. The theme of tonight, as well as saying to you and encouragingly, it's never too late to start anything. So tonight, we're going to have a look at some of the more common mistakes that we find people tend to have a propensity to make when it comes to working through and thinking about retirement planning. So we'll deal with those one at a time, starting with what might sound like a pretty obvious one, but not having a plan at all in the first place is probably one of the biggest and most common mistakes. So if some of you have already started that process, you're already well ahead of the vast majority of people. The second area I'm just going to have a look at is a tendency for people to think about cashing up their KiwiSaver and retirement savings at age 65. And we'll have a look at why that's not the best thing to be doing. Also, when it comes to retirement planning, one of the common areas that people struggle with is just getting the right risk settings. So we'll discuss that a little bit. I'll then start moving into some of the less financial issues, including how people are thinking about their legacies and what they want to leave behind, and some of the healthcare rest home components of retirement planning that tend to get overlooked. So we'll have a look at those. And then probably the next big one after not having a plan in the first place is an area that I'm calling non-financial planning, and it tends to be significantly overlooked and to the detriment of a lot of people. So those are the 5 areas I'm going to have a look at tonight. We'll wrap it up with hopefully some sort of practical action steps that you can take away at the end of it, and we'll have a chance for you to ask me some difficult questions, and if there's silence, you'll know that they're too hard and I've left. So let's have a start with the first area, and just having a plan in the first place. I'm not sure how many of you joined the first webinar we had back in April. It's about 3 months ago. If you did join that one, great, and hopefully you have learned a bit more about one of the great planning tools that is available to you as a KiwiSaver member on our platform, which is My Money Map. So if you're already a KiwiSaver member, you have access to this tool either on your laptop or your desktop, or in fact on your mobile app. So that particular tool is a fabulous place to start your retirement plan if you don't already have one. And I'd encourage you to have a look at that. What it covers, just briefly as a snapshot of one of the slides I had from the last webinar, is it's a great tool to just play around with a number of the settings and components that are really key to maximizing your KiwiSaver, and allows you to play around with your potential retirement spending patterns. You can see down the bottom there. It has a deal of flexibility in terms of the age at which you retire, and that's a critical element of this as well, just because the number 65, and we'll talk a bit more about that. The tool also shows you how your contributions and the rate of contributions and the funds you're in will accumulate over time to give you a picture of what it might look like in terms of a lump sum when you get to the retirement age. And then it's got a visual graphic of how your spending might then unfold after that. And I think importantly, what it does, it helps you to sort of get some confidence in giving you an estimate of the age at which, based on all of those plans and inputs, the age at which it's expected that your money might run out. And I think for a lot of people, that's one of the big unknowns and fears about retirement planning, is just not knowing exactly how long their money is going to last. So that tool, as I said, is a great way of getting started on the journey of having a really good base for a retirement plan. So I encourage you to look at that. So just moving on now to mistake number 2, and this tendency for people to have a cashing up mindset at age 65. And too many people think that when they reach that magic age, that that's what they should be doing. But in reality, it's just a number. And all that really should change at that point is that you will start getting, if you're eligible, of course, the pension from the New Zealand government, which the current rates are, if you don't know, before tax, $580 a week if you're single, and $880 per week for a couple if you're both eligible. So really, that's all that should really change. You start getting some more money in. Now, obviously, you have access to your KiwiSaver account money from age 65, but you should normally only be withdrawing that if you need to pay off some debts, or if you have a one-off expense that you've already planned for, like a holiday or a new car. It shouldn't necessarily already trigger a change in your strategy. A good plan should already have provided a relatively seamless transition across that number. So that's a good test for a good plan. And in terms of what that plan should look like, it's not a bad idea to have already included some sort of goal which sees you moving towards this concept of 3 buckets of money in your KiwiSaver account to fund your retirement. Because for the average person, those retirement years should be around about 20. So it's quite a long time period that you should be allowing for, and that 3-bucket approach is not a bad way of trying to address that. Just briefly, I'll give you a quick snapshot of what the 3-bucket approach might look like for sort of an average person. And just bear in mind that everything that I'm talking about tonight is really just sort of a general nature, and all I can provide really is sort of some general advice and wisdom to you, and it can't be necessarily at a personal level. That's something that we would certainly encourage you to see a financial advisor about, trying to personalize how this works. But in some sort of principle, you'll find that the 3 buckets are conservative approach at one end, with relatively high levels of cash, a balanced fund in the middle, and then a growth fund at the end, which has a high proportion of more riskier assets. And you can see the mix there, generally speaking. And importantly, it's all related to sort of the time frames of when you might need the money. So a short-term bucket for your drawdowns over the next 1 to 5 years, a medium-term bucket sitting in a more balanced fund that has exposure to shares and other assets like that for the next 5 to 10 years. And then the longer term, 10 years plus, should be sitting still in a high growth fund. You'll see how the time frame here is one of the key factors in determining what type of fund you're in. And each fund obviously has different risks, and getting that overall risk setting right is going to make such a big difference to your retirement outcomes. And this is again where using a financial advisor can help you to tease out that a little more. So when we look at risk settings a bit further, so we've sort of segued nicely into mistake number 3. As I said, having the wrong risk settings can be quite a significant negative impact on your outcomes. And I talked about time frames relative to when you need to spend a significant amount of your savings. And it's crucial that that sort of concept is reasonably well understood. It's the time frame relative to when you need to spend an amount of money. So if you don't need to withdraw and spend a significant amount of your savings at age 65, for example, then that particular date is not really relevant for calculating your time frame. And it's always good to remind yourself of what is the right time frame whenever you see your KiwiSaver balance moving up and down in the short term, of course. So here's a graphic of the returns that you would have seen, or we have all seen, from world share markets, annual returns from world share markets. And the good news is there's a lot of green bars on the right-hand side showing a positive annual return, but it's all the red bars that we see in the short term that can be a little unsettling. So if you're 50 years old and in your own home, you've got another 15 years to go until you can really touch your money. So annual share market volatility is not something to be too unsettled about. Your relative time frame is a 15-year time frame, so the picture looks quite significantly different when you start looking at returns on a rolling average 15-year basis. And I think the most significant piece of information in this particular chart is that even if you have the worst timing in the world and happen to have a big lump of investments that you put into the stock market right at the top of the technology bubble burst back in the year 2000, fast forward 15 years and your annual average return from those shares still would not have been negative. So that time frame makes such a big difference to how you think about approaching the risk setting. So a really important thing to make sure you chat to somebody about, particularly a financial advisor. Now, I know it's easier said than done to just ignore short-term volatility in your KiwiSaver balance. So as I said, just keeping in touch with an advisor is a highly recommended thing to do whenever you're feeling just a little bit uneasy or not sleeping. Just to have someone remind you, hey, this is the time frame that's relevant to you, so you can ignore all the sort of short-term noise that's going on. Just going to turn now to mistake number 4. And it's about the sort of overall concept of legacies in healthcare. And you've probably no doubt heard of the somewhat amusing SKIING acronym, standing for Spending the Kids' Inheritance. We find it's a common occurrence that many retirees actually end up sacrificing quite a chunk of their retirement lifestyles because they want to leave a large legacy to their children or their grandchildren. And that's perfectly understandable and fantastic. And I'm not suggesting that you just leave them nothing. But it is important to really think about what this legacy might be. And think about having a chat with your children as you are getting closer to that sort of retirement time. You might be pleasantly surprised to find that they're very happy with you just leaving them with the family home, debt-free of course, and that is more than enough to look after them after you've gone. And if you've got confidence in that and genuinely comfortable with that, then that literally means that you can confidently spend all of your other money. I often find that people hold back quite a considerable chunk of that because they haven't really thought too much about whether their children will or won't actually need that inheritance. So I would encourage that thought process and conversation if you can. Now, the other element of that is just relating to estate planning. And when you're thinking about your legacies, please also just a reminder to give yourself some peace of mind and make sure that you have a will in place. I know too many people, just one of those things you never get around to doing. But doing that process will also be a nice catalyst to consider if you want other people or indeed organisations to receive anything from your estate. And then you can factor that into your financial retirement plan as well. And just the third part of sort of legacies in healthcare relates to long-term rest home care. We've seen that far too many people tend to overestimate how much money they might need to be looked after in a rest home. And the harsh reality, in a sense, is that outside dementia as a significant cause of health issues in the latter years, the actual average time that people spend in rest home care is only around 18 to 24 months. It's a lot shorter than people think. And unfortunately, once you get into rest home care, unless it's through dementia, as I said, your time in there is never normally that long. And the average cost of looking after that spend is around about $100,000. And that does tend to be a lot less than what people think they're going to need. So just, again, make sure you consider this in all of your planning numbers and don't allow too much for long-term care and too much for legacies if you haven't really thought through it, because leaving all of that on the table will significantly pare back what you're able to do in terms of your own lifestyle in retirement. So just finally, I want to have a look at what I call non-financial retirement planning. And I can't stress the importance of this enough. Unfortunately, there's an industry sort of over-reliance on the financial factors in making retirement decisions. And this, ironically, is a major reason why a growing number of people are failing at retirement. Far too many retirees that we see and hear stories about never actually get around to, never actually get around to playing golf, learning to paint, boogie boarding or partying, and any number of other things on that 24 awesome things that you all want to be doing when you hit that lovely time of retirement. I can tell you from all of the research and evidence that people have come across is that if you are not painting, traveling, writing, doing yoga, boogie boarding, or playing golf before retirement, the chances are very high that you won't actually be doing this after you retire. Now, you might be asking, so why is that? And the simple reality is that retirement makes people more of what they already are. I'll just repeat that and let you absorb and understand that. Retirement makes people more of what they already are. It doesn't change you or make things better. In its most basic form, all it simply gives you is more time to do what you want, which is usually what you already know. Which leads us to this thing known as the retirement curse. And it's sometimes also called the status quo of home life, and it's building on what I've just talked about. As people, we generally go with whatever is the easiest. We don't want to break the status quo. In other words, we select a default option. So if sitting on the couch in front of the telly is what you typically do after a hard day's work, then guess what? Sorry, things seems to be moving forward without me even touching anything. So if you're sitting on the couch in front of the television is what you're typically doing now after a hard day's work, and that's great. It's a great way to chill out and just sort of unwind after a hard day's work. But if that's all you tend to do, then guess what your default is likely to be when you are fully retired from work. So in the same way as I talked about a seamless financial transition, it's just as important to think about how you can avoid that abrupt transition from working full-time to working no time. And if the nature of your work doesn't easily allow this, then perhaps start thinking about looking at what part-time work or community service you might be able to get into. This whole area of the non-financial behavioral psychology element of retirement planning is a huge topic in itself, and we could probably talk all night about it. But I just really wanted to give you a quick heads up to make sure that you include it specifically in your retirement planning thought processes. And there's a lot of information out there on the web that you can have a look at. Just Google the retirement curse to give you more of an understanding of what that actually means. As I said, it's significantly related to the fact that we tend as people to just do whatever comes easiest in the status quo. So it's such an important thing to bear that in mind when you're thinking about those years. Okay, I would like to provide you with some opportunities to ask me some questions. I've tried to sort of give you some teasers and some thoughts along the way about some of the common mistakes that people make when it comes to retirement planning. So after this, we're going to send you tomorrow a follow-up email, which will also include a link to my first webinar, The Road to Retirement. So we'll send you that link, and it'd be useful if you haven't already to read through and have a listen to that one, because in there it's got a little bit of a roadmap about how you go about completing that financial plan. And in particular, it talks about the My Money Map, which is just such a fantastic tool to help flesh out a lot of the sort of financial elements of the plan. Then you move into the non-financial elements. So I would encourage you also just to find a little bit of time to write down and think about your non-financial goals and your bucket list, and try and focus on just the top 1 to 3. You might have that 24 awesome list of things you want to do, but the reality is also with a list like that, there's a significant risk that you just get overwhelmed and paralyzed with so many choices and things that you want to do that you end up doing none of them. So really important just to try and hone in on what are the top 1 to 3 things that I want to do, and make sure that of those, you're doing some of them now. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go out and play golf, try and find 18 holes of golf every day, but if you're thinking that you might want to try some painting, then you should be doing a little bit of painting now. Just try it, because you might not like it. Literally, if you thought, I'm gonna write a book. If you've literally never sat down and written something book-like now, you might find it's probably a good idea to start doing that now, because again, you might not like it. And the same applies for all of those things on that list. Playing a guitar, I'd go and rent a guitar now and just find 5 minutes a day to start strumming away at it, and see if you really, if that's really what you want to do. And that'll help the whole sort of seamless transition, because as I said, once you start moving into less work, you'll find that all of the things that you were starting to dabble with and dip your toes in the water before, and the things that you really like doing, you've just now got more time to do more of that, and it'll be great. And you'll suddenly find that that'll fill in the time nicely. And then just the final action point is, if you haven't already, we have financial advisors available throughout the country that we would recommend to you, and it's free to use their services to talk about KiwiSaver. If you want to go a bit beyond that into bigger issues, you've got other investments, they might want to talk to you about a fee that they'll charge. But it's just to focus on KiwiSaver and maybe just to tease out the My Money Map and the retirement planning tools, and just focusing on that and making sure you've got all the right settings. There's no fee for that. Those financial advisors will have a chat to you free of charge. That's the end of the bits that I wanted to cover off now. So let's go through and see what we've got on the question side. Okay, so let me just, I'll just read this through and then try and answer it when I get to the end. So someone here is 50 and have $500,000 in a high growth account. Want to save another $500,000, that's great. So $1 million, that's a nice number. Should I put in the next 30% into a balanced fund and then the last 20% just in cash and high growth? Yeah, so look, you've got like 15 years to go. I think you can wait until you start looking at that 3-bucket approach, until you're sort of within that 10-year time horizon. And then once you hit that point, you can probably start de-risking the portfolio so that you start aiming towards those 3 buckets and just start reducing some of the amount of money you've got in the high growth fund to reach a stage so that by the time you seamlessly hit that 65 number, you've got your 3 buckets all set up. But it sounds like you're well on track to achieve that. Some of you are saying there was some sound issues, but that's okay. Someone joined late and missed points 1 and 2, which was about having a plan in the first place and risk settings. There'll be a link sent to access. Yes, there will be. So tomorrow you'll get an email which will have a link to both this one and the last one. Question here about should you pay off your mortgage at 65 using KiwiSaver? I would have said a couple of years ago when interest rates were really low and mortgage rates were really low that it was more of a 50-50 call. It sort of would have depended. But I think now that interest rates on mortgages have got up to that 6, 7 or even 8% level, that it's probably a good idea to use your KiwiSaver at age 65 to pay off as much of that mortgage as you can. You know, if you've got nothing left and you've got some other income coming in, there may be some movement around that, but generally speaking, the default would be probably look to pay it off. But something you can have a chat to an advisor about to flesh that out a little bit more. Someone wants to donate some money to different charities. Can your advisor help with that or a will lawyer? Yeah, I think it depends on the advisor. Some probably can, some probably can't. Certainly worthwhile asking them. Yeah, I'm sure that they'll have contacts and knowledge about the sort of avenues to explore. Someone here, 60, still has a $400,000 mortgage. Is there any hope? There's always hope. Look, I don't know how much you have got in your KiwiSaver with a $400,000 mortgage. Obviously, it sounds like you probably don't have that much, so you can't just pay it off when you hit 65. I would talk to a financial advisor about all of the different levers that you potentially can pull to try and work through that. You know, one of the things that I talked about in my first webinar is the reality of, and obviously if you can, continue to work to just generate some ongoing part-time income, because the great thing is when you turn 65, the government's going to start paying you a regular weekly income, and that might well help significantly in taking the burden off that mortgage. So if you can keep working beyond that, even if it's just part-time, and receive the full pension as well, then suddenly your income picture changes a wee bit, and that can relieve the pressure. Someone's asked, can I continue to contribute to KiwiSaver and receive the same benefits of using it as a retirement savings account after 65? Absolutely. I've seen too many people close their KiwiSaver account, which is a big mistake. So definitely keep it open, keep contributing. The only thing that stops, of course, is that unfortunately the government won't continue giving you the $520 government contribution from age 65, but you still receive all of the other benefits, particularly if you're in the booster fund, the accidental death cover, and all the various other things. So yes, it just becomes a nice little retirement savings account. And if you're following the 3 buckets approach, and you have one of those buckets being a cash account earning a cash savings, then it effectively operates exactly like a savings account. You can take your money out whenever you want. Look, I think that's all of the questions here. Hopefully we've covered them all. If not, then by all means, just send us an email with any follow-up questions. You'll probably wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, I wish I'd asked David that. Can I thank you again for joining us? I hope that's given you some insights into things, and you'll get an email tomorrow. So this is just the last little question. Where do I find my money map? So if you log into your booster account, you'll find a little tab that near the tools that says My Money Map. It's all one word. If you can't, give us a quick buzz and someone in our team will point you in the right direction, Joanna. Okay, thanks again. Have a good night and happy retirement planning.